It's 22 minutes past 6. Now, there are warnings of tax hikes in tomorrow's budget as the Chancellor looks to pay for a so-called Brexit fighting fund, as well as plugging the holes in social care and bailing out small firms hit by those business rate rises. One option on the table, apparently, is bringing national insurance contributions for the self-employed up by 3 pence in the pound. That would put them at the same level as other workers. But what effect might this have? I'm now joined by James Gribben from the Association of Independent Professionals and the Self-Employed, which represents self-employed workers. Good morning, James.
Good morning.
Now, a 3% hike is rumoured, possibly, in national insurance. How has the Chancellor arrived at that figure?
Well, I think the issue the Chancellor's facing is that more people want to be self-employed. The numbers of people who work for themselves have been rising pretty astronomically in recent years. And the issue is that when you're an employee, you have an employer who's making a 13.8% contribution in national insurance on top of the contribution the employee makes. When you're self-employed, it's only one contribution that's coming forward. So currently that's 9%, and it's rumoured that it may rise by 3 pence up to 12%. So for the Chancellor, it's trying to close a bit of the tax gap that he sees. Now, that's not great news if you're self-employed, and a 3% rise for anybody would be a pretty difficult thing to
stomach. Because it's like a 3% pay cut, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, and if you're a lower paid self-employed person, it's going to be really tough. And that's why, certainly from IPSA's perspective, we believe that, sure, look at the taxation system for the self-employed. It's already really complicated. When you work for yourself, you've got to do your tax returns every year, and in fact, soon you're going to have to do them 4 times a year online. So there's a lot to get your head around, and adding to your tax burden, that's a lot to ask. And certainly we think the Chancellor should think about consulting widely before putting through such a measure.
Just last week, of course, we had quite a fair bit of concern about the rise in business rates and the feelings that the business community hadn't been consulted on this. Now we're talking about a 3% rise, potentially, in national insurance for the self-employed. Do you think the government does listen to the various small businesses up and down the country?
Well, government has a really difficult challenge in having to pay for post-Brexit Britain and making sure that we're in a good place to fight for that. The government does listen to business, but it does have other priorities at the same time. Now, we believe that post-Brexit Britain is going to rely on the entrepreneurialism of the self-employed, and the last thing the Chancellor would want to do is hamper that. And that's the concern we might have if you see a rise in national insurance contributions for the self-employed.
Like you say, it is maybe a difficult time for the government following the EU referendum. They want to try and build up what they're calling this Brexit fighting fund. If they don't charge an extra 3% to the self-employed, where do you think there are other options for the government to raise some money?
Yeah, there are lots of places the government can look, and it's already been rumoured that they're going to look at things like fuel and alcohol duty, but they have other things that they need to pay for as well. It does appear they may try and redress some of the balance around business rates and pay for additional social care. So it's really difficult to see where they're going to get the additional cash from. They're not in the ideal position.
Okay, and lastly, as a representative of the self-employed in the UK, what would their dream budget be? What would they really like to see change tomorrow?
Well, really what they'd like to see is the government say, look, you guys go on and do great work for the UK economy, and we'll recognise that. The best way of doing that is not to add an additional tax burden, that's for sure. They'd like to see incentives to start businesses. They'd like to see additional support given. There are some imbalances in the tax system affecting the self-employed which could be redressed. Right now, working freelance mums, they don't necessarily have the same access to maternity pay that employed mums do. The government could certainly look to plug that gap. There's also big issues around training for the self-employed and how that could be made tax deductible, because we want a higher skilled economy, and that's one way to achieve it.
OK, James, well, we'll find out 12:30 tomorrow what things look like. But for now, James Gribben from the Association of Independent Professionals and the Self-Employed, thanks for joining us